All right, so this is class 5. Just want to give you, this is what we're covering over here. So basic graphic design is more or less what I'm covering. We'll go over more graphic design stuff as time goes by, because obviously you guys, I'm assuming, haven't taken any graphic design courses. I know that's not really a requirement in there. This is not an area of strength for me, but it's definitely something that it's good to know if you want to create motion graphics, or a lot of times we're on the fringes of graphic design when we're developing things, and especially if you're creating interactive media. Okay, so first thing, a basic kind of principle of graphic design is, I don't know if you know this, you can hit Control plus and minus. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so I can see a little bit better. It's proximity, okay? So when things are near each other, you automatically assume that that they have an association, okay? That they are one and the same, right? So if you look at, these things are all in line, right? And they're all next to each other. So you automatically assume that these, I mean, you can tell anyways, they're all presidents, right? But you associate them as together, right? Same thing with this column versus this column. Now, one of the things you will notice is that something's different here. Because these guys are near each other, and these guys are near each other, you automatically have an association that there's something different about these presidents as opposed to these presidents, okay? Based on proximity. And again, when you're, a lot of graphic design comes down to organizing data. What you're trying to do is take all of the general information that you have and group it in ways that makes it easier for the user to use, to understand. Okay, so if you look at here, you automatically associate, because this image is next to this text and this text is next to this headline, that each one of these things have an association with each other just because they're near each other. Okay, if I put a different picture here of, like, let's say John Adams, you would think that that was what John Adams looked like, even though it's not. And I know it sounds stupid, but that's because of proximity. Probably what's even more important is white space. That's a really big thing, and it's something you don't necessarily think about. But that probably gives more power to something than anything else. So if we were looking at this list again, all right, so you can see I have groups of 2, right? And again, with proximity, you assume these 2 are something, these 2 are something, these 2 are something, these 2 are something, and these 2. But what you will notice that the last one, there's a slightly larger gap, right? It's got one more return, one more space, okay, between that one and this one. So you automatically assume that this has more importance. There's something significant about these 2 presidents as opposed to the other ones, because there's more space, there's more white space around it. If I have a single letter with lots of white around it, that letter is going to have a lot of importance. Even more so than, let's say I have one big red letter and I have just a bunch of text all the way around it. That big red letter is going to seem important, but not as much as just even a small letter with lots of white space around it, okay? You guys remember that whenever we're working with anything, it's always in contrast, right? So if you want to make something look really big, you have to have something small next to it. So if you want to make something seem really important, you have to have something seem really not important next to it, if that makes sense. So having white space is the least important you can have. So that really gives a lot of emphasis. So do not underestimate the power of white space and try to utilize it as much as possible. Again, basic text actually works by the principles of proximity and white space. If you look, each one of these words are made up of letters, but because the letters are close to each other, we know that that's one word. And then we put spaces in between, which basically helps us know which word's which, right? Now, if you look, if I start to make, and you can see there's spaces between each line. If I start to space out these as much as the other, you can see it gets really hard to read, right? So take that as a significant thing. Eye stops. So one of the things you want to do is limit the total number of eye stops. So basically the idea is that if I were to look at this card here, you can see that I don't know how to spell George Washington. George Washington. But you'll see that I have to put my eye here, my eye here, my eye here, my eye here, and my eye here, right? It's a lot of motion. It's too much, and it makes it harder to read because it takes longer than what you would associate, right? So again, this goes into the whole proximity thing. What I could do instead is that I could take United States President and George Washington. Those make sense to stick together because that's what his title is. And then if you look at this, obviously the contact information should probably be associated with each other as well, okay? And by doing that, this all makes sense as well, all right? But this also has the most significance. All right, visual hierarchy, and it kind of goes with the thing above. Basically, the idea is this, is that you want the most important elements to be up front and center, and then all the subsequent less important things recede, okay? So if you were to look at this here, images always draw the most attention. So by having even a faded image, it automatically makes you look at this first. Also by having this big and bold, larger font will come forward. The next most important things are basically these Democrats, Republicans, Federalists, and so on and so forth, right? By putting those in there, we know that, okay, we're doing some sort of parties, and then it's the people afterwards, okay? And you could also even say that this is probably a little more important than the people, because you can see I put color on there, okay? Not an image, so it's not as important as this, but it definitely makes it seem more significant, okay? Good. Contrast. Basically, the idea is that if you're going to have contrast within a piece, make sure that you're not just putting a little bit of contrast. You want to make it significant, otherwise it looks like it's an error. So you can see there's a little bit of contrast between this and this stuff, but there's not a lot. This gets a little bit better, right? Now, like, okay, that's really much stronger. But this is the strongest, because I'm putting this black and then on white. Now there's a lot of contrast between the two, and this really comes forward. As opposed to this one, which does okay, and this one does not at all. Alignment, and this is one that you don't normally think of, that a lot of people don't know, is basically you want to have everything aligned when possible. Because just like having things next to each other make them associated with each other, having things aligned with each other helps each one of those groups associate with each other, okay? So think of it like this, like if I have a page, if I have everything aligned to the left of the page, I know that it all belongs on the same page. But if for some reason, one thing's like aligned over here or something centered, they don't feel as cohesive. But by sharing a implicit line, like this shares this implicit line on the right, it helps associate this with this. These two could be totally separate. This is centered or even justified is not a very good alignment. So one of the things you can do too is that if you have an image, it's a good idea to actually align it with the image. So here you see this is justified, right? Or, yeah, justified. And it doesn't really work that well. It's kind of centered, but you see how it's got a ragged edge, right? We don't really like that because it doesn't stick to this as well. If I put the alignment straight up with the image, it automatically now feels cohesive, right? Let the tear be on this side because it doesn't matter as much. But by doing this, these seem much more together. There's a lot more unity. Repetition, a good thing to do is just to repeat different elements of the different principles and elements of design. So if I'm going to use, a certain kind of font, it's good to repeat that font over and over again. It's good to repeat a pattern over and over again. It's good to just use repeating things. It helps, again, create visual unity. It also is easier for the person to read because they've already established, like, okay, this is the style, and then they know that it's they don't have to like think about it, okay? So again, you can see like I repeated these numbers. A real nice thing that people often do if they're doing multiple pages is they'll put like these horizontal rules. See, there's one here and there's one on the top, and then I put the page number there. By having that, each page, if they all have that, it makes each page seem cohesive as well, because I just repeat that pattern and it makes the entire thing come together. Composition is basically all of the rules above to illustrate the meaning and emphasis of your ideas. Basically, it's just the general idea of utilizing the principles, the design principles and elements of art, okay? Utilizing all those things in order to create the overall composition, like, the general page layout, okay? Typography. So if you were in a graphic design program, the number one thing that they, or one of the major things that you would end up doing is typography. They'll have a whole course just on that if you're part of a bachelor program. And basically, it just deals with either the creation of or the utilization of font in order to say what you want, okay? The best way that I can explain it is this. If I have if I, it's kind of like art itself, right? So a lot of times, like, let's say I do a drawing of a puppy, okay? You might look at the puppy and say, if I drew it really gruesome and, you know, contorted and stuff, it might look scary. But if I drew it super with big eyes and whatever, well, now it looks, you know, cute, right? Now, both are pictures of puppies, but the way that I drew them created an implicit meaning. Like, explicitly, yes, they're dogs. But implicitly, it's not. So the same thing can happen with type. If I drew birthday, or if I wrote out birthday party, right? If I wrote it in bubble letters, you'd be like, oh, it's going to be like a kiddie fun birthday party. But if I wrote it in like that horror, like blood font, you'd be like, oh, it must be like a horror film, or it's going to be like a monster party, or something like that. It gives you a feeling about what the text is saying. It's not just the words, but also the way the font is that's making you feel a certain way. So whenever you come up to a project and you have to do some typography, think about who your user is, and what you're trying to implicitly say, not just literally what the words are. They're basically, you can throw in your fonts, your typefaces into two categories. There's serif and sans serif. Serif had these little extra knucks here, the little jibber jabbers here, and basically those started being created for print. The idea was that they noticed that when they put these extra little serifs, if you will, on there, it made it easier to read, like lines across. And I think the reason why, if you think about it, is that this almost creates a underline, which, if you think about it, it makes this a little more cohesive as opposed to this, right? However, when this gets really small, it's hard to read. So a lot of times with things that are read digitally, they'll actually use sans serif, which do not have the little knucks, the serifs, right? Sans without serif. And it works really well because when this gets really small, it gets kind of gobbledygook. These extra little bits get in the way, but when this gets really small, it actually still reads pretty well. Some text that you don't want to do. Don't use every font you own in one document, right? So whatever you're making, you generally want to try and use 2, maybe 3 fonts. Don't go above that. Do not put 2 spaces after a period. It used to be necessary for typewriters in order to like separate words. Don't use all capital letters. It makes it look like you're shouting. It's not tasteful. And don't center large amounts of text. It'll give you the weak alignment, such as I was mentioning earlier. I have this cool little video that you can watch. It's not a requirement. I'm not going to watch it now, but it's just neat. They kind of show how to manipulate text in order to give it more meaning than just what the words are. There's a really interesting thing, this book here about data design. It's a whole thing on its own. It's not really an area of expertise. The main thing you need to know is that you need to collect your data, right? Whatever that may be. Then you have to organize it, just like we put sections, proximally into areas. So you got to try and basically put them into categories, and then you have to make the visuals in order to help the audience understand what you're trying to say. So most of the time, it's like you're trying to visualize mathematics in some way, or a survey, or something like that. I made 2 tutorials here. You don't have to use them, but basically one is just how to make a button for Unity instead of using their built-in button. This is just a real quick, like making a simple icon and then bringing it in so that it's stretchable and the whole 9 yards. Okay. I also made one here that's not updated quite yet. I'm going to back this up here, Control minus minus. And this is just like how to go into Photoshop and just make a general UE. I just tried to make a start screen. Again, you don't have to necessarily watch it, but you might already know how to do it. Your next assignment is going to be to create an interactive educational program. Basically, what I want you to do is create your graphics. So you're going to create, you're going to find photographs or take photographs of whatever it is that you need, draw or create whatever illustrations you need, and then also make your UI components, meaning like your buttons, sliders, whatever kind of UI elements you're going to have, you're going to want to make those as well. And then you take, and then lastly, you're going to put everything into, you're going to make a Unity project folder, and you can put everything and all the folders subsequently to put your artwork and stuff in there. Put that all together, zip it, and put it in here. So just to give you an idea, I have, where are you? So I have this here. So I have my Unity project folder, which is right here. Okay. And then I have, and it's all underneath Edu Program. I have artwork. Here's all my artwork. And this is my pre-pro stuff. Okay. So But I already made my artwork of the various things. So that's it. Good luck.